pretty clear that if advertisers focus on the non-loyal customers, they basically get a 7x uplift in revenues. So it's a pretty massive opportunity. And especially as we look across, we see the definition of loyalty starts to change, which might be very contrary to how an individual merchant might be thinking about it.
Today on Customerland, I have the privilege and pleasure to speak with Amit Gupta, who's CEO at Cardlytics, and just to acknowledge the heartburn that the teams on either side have been going through to put this together for several weeks, actually over a month now, because there's so much to talk about, so much vital stuff that I'm anticipating comes out of this conversation that I'm eager to get going. But first, Amit, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm absolutely a fan. I think the customer-centric business element always is close to my heart. So I'm excited about the conversation today, Mike.
I feel like on some level, we should have had this conversation a couple of years ago, but glad that it finally happened. Just for context, for people who may not really know what Cardlytics is all about, can you talk to us a little bit about the business model, plural, and your role there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Cardlytics is a very typical commerce media platform, and it might be a bit of a flavor du jour because it's kind of gotten into more prominence now. But it is, I mean, that's something that we've been on. We've been on this journey for quite a while. And we operate in two ecosystems. So as a commerce media platform, I'll probably state the obvious, we're powered by our publishers' first-party data. And that's the bedrock of modern ad foundation today. The two ecosystems we play in, there's a financial media ecosystem and a retail media side. On the financial media ecosystem, we arguably run one of the largest financial media networks across US and UK. We have over $6 trillion of spend visibility on an annual basis, over 225 million unique customer monthly qualified users. So the scale is big. We work with the most leading banks across these countries, and there's a substantial value that gets provided to the end consumer. So to that end, we're proud that we've delivered over $1 billion of rewards to the end consumers, and we're pretty happy about that. On the retail media side, this is where we actually house our identity resolution capability. We also bring to market our retail media offering, which goes under the brand name of Ripple. And more recently, Mike, we've started to bring blend the best of card-linked offers and the best of retail media. So let me pause. Hopefully that gives you a sense at the high level. Financial media, retail media, both umbrellas fall under the umbrella of commerce media.
So for somebody who's been on the outside but looking in at your operations for several years, it is a little bit eye-opening to see that's how you kind of frame this. I've seen the operations. Let's face it, I've spoken to your counterparts, your cohorts, your colleagues, and your competitors over time. So I had that as kind of my own personal framework, but was a bit of a surprise when we first started talking about this conversation I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but that you all see yourselves as a commerce media network. It makes perfect sense, but that's a term that frankly hasn't really been in vogue until very recently. And then it seems like everybody who has been in retail media is now suddenly in commerce media. And yet, based on this conversation, it certainly looks like Cardlytics has been at it the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've been on the journey for a decade and a half, as you know. And the one part of our commerce media offering, which is truly differentiated, are card-linked offers. Right, we pioneered this concept, this ad format that is truly unique, Mike, and we might be slightly biased because we pioneered it, but there is, it's one of the few ad formats that really drives and delivers instant value to the end user, and that's what we like, right? And it really does go seamlessly across both the financial media side and the retail media side. And that's the power of the more modern tech stack that helps us kind of bring it across the two verticals easily. So that's what we're proud of.
Right now, I think McKinsey has this space projected to hit $100 billion by 2027. It's astronomical because for a category that, let's face it, didn't really exist, say, 3 years ago, this is almost unheard of. And I'm kind of comparing it in my mind to the emergence of retail media networks, which were this another kind of bombshell addition to uh, traditional digital media spend and how much money shifted over into those channels and how quickly it shifted. But by comparison, commerce media is much bigger and it's a much faster shift. I suppose it's just a natural organic outgrowth of people realizing what's possible out there. But I'd love to hear your take as someone who sits literally at the top of that pyramid, how you've seen this evolve. What kind of got us here?
Yeah, I think that is such a prescient question. There's an element of what made it evolve, and we can perhaps even draw the line. Where does it go from here, right? And I think the success of retail media, really kind of brought to bear the fact that a merchant's assets, right, which are developed as part of doing routine business, which includes, the digital properties, the physical properties, and so on and so forth, and the customer first party data, all those assets start to become touch points, not just only for customer loyalty, but also for revenue generation via digital advertising and so on and so forth, right? And obviously, we have kind of on the retail media side, the ad dollars are pretty concentrated because of the size of the retailers on the retail side. The interesting thing, as we look about commerce media broadly, there are several platforms that have high frequency customer interaction, and that's what makes commerce media unique. That we expect the ad dollars to actually be fairly spread across several large customer platforms. So we don't expect like the top two or top three really kind of getting the, let's say, the 95% of the market share, or 85% of the market share, excuse me. So that's the interesting thing about commerce media. Secondly, we actually believe, done properly, this can drive not only revenue, which is real, but also the flywheel can actually drive customer loyalty, right? And then the last thing I'd say, especially as we think about moving forward, we can see ad dollars going away from the traditional publisher sites as we see the advent of the chat GPTs and different AI formats. So some of the traffic that was frankly going there, I mean, you and I perhaps are using some of these chat GPT like models to plan our trips, as an example, right? So by definition, the traffic that was going to go and look at some of those publisher sites is going to start moving, right? And as the traffic moves, the ad dollars have to come and move accordingly, right? So the commerce media scope today is interesting because there are a lot of platforms that have high frequency customer engagement, but moving forward, we can actually think about ad dollars moving even in higher volume and velocity.
Really interesting. You mentioned something that's kind of intriguing, which may be a bit of a dogleg on our primary conversation here, and that is that done properly, commerce media can actually build customer loyalty. I'd love to hear you kind of unpack that for us.
Yeah, I think that goes to the heart of CLO. So I'll probably just CLO as in like card linked offers format. So we have our data, and Qualtrics data suggests that whenever a card linked offer product is put out there, 64% of customers tend to spend more in that transaction, right? And 72% of customers end up spending more with the brand that has a card linked offer. So card linked offers, it's backed by data. It's a pretty powerful ad format and really drives significant value for the advertiser and obviously for the user. So you can connect something like that, a card links offer ad format, and you bring that organically in a merchant's experience, whether that's in retail, in airline, hospitality, or ride sharing, and you basically blend both, right? So we can think of an example of you can pick any consumer frequented platform. There's a distance between the two different spending events can be filled by a card-linked offer product or a card-linked offer format, and that drives not only value to the end consumer, but the reward back gets back in the wallet of the merchant, right? So if you think about a rideshare example, I can compare my rides, and instead of paying X dollars, I might be paying X minus $10 because I have $10 sitting for my previous purchases, which I moved because of the right offer from merchant A to merchant B. I may
Right.
have gotten too much in the weeds, but happy to kind of pull back up if you like.
No, I think that's fascinating. In fact, I mean, I'm personally very interested in the mechanics of that and what the kind of psychological triggers are that kind of create that deeper loyalty through that process. But that may take us too deep in the weeds, and we need to recover. So, couple of things that I'm keenly interested in your perspective on. Because of where you sit in the payments ecosystem, because of all the data that you have visibility to, and it was either you just mentioned it or it was in my notes somewhere, but a 5.8 trillion in consumer spend. This is a giant, first of all, it's a giant amount of transactions. There's an awful lot packed into that. But what you see by virtue of the quantity of data that flows through your systems is giant. And the insights that you get to see probably are at a level that most people, even most people who do purchase analytics, really don't get to see. Again, just by virtue of volume. So, what kinds of patterns or shifts have you seen that retailers should be paying attention to?
Yeah, we feel very privileged, and we treat this privilege with great responsibility and make sure everything is, the data is kind of well taken care of. But the insights are, as you rightly say, are very interesting. So maybe I'll share two parts to it. What trends are we seeing, and then how have we seen changes in loyalty definition? And maybe I can also double click on that. So some of the trends that we're seeing, uh, we see the fact that the consumer spend remains strong, right? Despite some of the recent news, the consumer spend, especially in the general retail side, we're seeing some growth, about 4 to 5% growth year on year. So that continues to be strong. But there are categories like general beauty, gas. There is some decline on the gas side. We see frequent trips, so it's not less about the trip, but because of the lower gas prices, we see there's a lower check size, so to speak. But there is some decline there. But overall, if you think about like entertainment and big box retail, that continues to be strong, and about 4 to 5% growth there as well. So trends are interesting. I think generally the spend holds steady. The other part that I'd like for us to also maybe, the insight that we also get from looking at the data, while the individual spend is very important at the individual purchase level, the category spend becomes very insightful, right? So what do I mean by that? So let's say Mike is a coffee lover and you go once a week to Dunkin' Donuts. So Dunkin' Donuts is going to think Mike is a loyal customer. That's fantastic. But Mike might be going to Starbucks the other 4 days a week, right? And that's kind of becomes more interesting for our leading advertisers and our leading merchant partners, because their definition of loyalty changes, and that comes with, because we have to your point, because we have the treasure trove of the close to $6 trillion of spend. It allows us to look at things horizontally across the category, across large major players in the retail space. So just to share some of the data, 50% of merchants, only 50% of merchants count customers are loyal, right? Whereas people expect that a very different number from a loyalty spend standpoint, and the remaining shoppers are spending 79% with other merchants in the same category. right? So if we kind of do the math and, from our data, it's pretty clear that if advertisers focus on the non-loyal customers, they basically get a 7x uplift in revenues. So it's a pretty massive opportunity. And especially as we look across, we see the definition of loyalty starts to change, which might be very contrary to how an individual merchant might be thinking about it.
It's super insightful. And I think, again, just by virtue of the fact that you all see purchase data beyond what an individual merchant might have access to. So you're seeing it across payment rails, you're seeing it across merchants for sure, categories. And I've thought for the longest time, like anyone who has that kind of insight could be sitting on a gold mine. And apparently I was right. Especially
So.
now, and how you could leverage that. I was in a conversation, this is probably about 4 months, 3, 4 months ago, with a group that's deep into the technology of commerce media. And we had a kind of a similar conversation about who really sensibly could power the data needs for something like this, who has the insights. And there are very few players who can really answer that question well. And of course, Cardlytics can. You can optimize for NPS, and that's good. You can optimize for CSAT, also good. You can optimize for loyalty, and that's good too. But here's the thing. If you're not optimizing for total customer value, for total customer profitability, then you're just optimizing for output, not the bottom line. Here's the truth. If your strategy isn't building better customers, more frequent, more loyal, more deeply bonded, then it's not a strategy, it's a performance. At Customerland Studio, we help brands find the value, find the opportunities, the force multipliers hiding inside the customer relationship. And then we help them optimize for scale, for yield, for profit across the entire relationship. Because the other thing we've learned, the only strategy that actually matters is the one that makes your customers more profitable. Customerland Studio, to make better customers. Go to customerland.net and click on the studio.
Yeah, I think you're so right. One thing you mentioned, which I want to emphasize, which is absolutely non-trivial, is an importance of a modernized tech stack, right? Because as we get the data, there's a decent amount of lift that our tech stack is able to do. Just to give you a sense of, as we get the data, the merchant identification is not clean. And we've invested a fair bit of our algorithms and our data engineering efforts to make sure merchant cleaning is substantially better. And frankly, some of our bank partners benefit from that and actually ask us back because because we see scale, we're able to identify certain POS data strings that individual bank partner may or may not be able to identify, right? So at every stage of the data funnel, whether it's at the cleaning level, whether it's at the relevance level or the right level of targeting, we make sure that we use our algo, especially the data at scale, through a modernized tech stack to be able to give the best value to the advertiser and to the user and the publisher. So the flywheel works, but it can only scale with a modernized tech stack.
Would you, just curious, that kind of data insights and cleaning, homogenizing ability, is that a separate business line for Cardlytics, or is that just something kind of baked into your existing offerings?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there are partners who've actually asked, hey, we'll pay for this because this is so valuable for us. Because frankly, we don't have the ability, and they're like, you're actually enriching my data. We'll pay for this, give it back to us.
Right.
So it is not, to answer your question directly, it is not a separate business line, right? This is part of our partner relationship that we offer to our partners. And now the interesting thing, we recently launched our Insights portal, which allows our leading advertisers to start to get a sense of not only how they're doing, but they can actually compare themselves with their leading competitors across the industry. So they start to see trends. And we made more and more of that as self-serve. We have a large client analytics team that also does custom analytics. So one part is around cleaning and making sure, the typical data hygiene is there. But the other part, as we've talked about, as you mentioned, Mike, is about insights. And we've tried to make sure that some of that is on our advertisers' fingertips, but we also go and a few miles ahead, up and beyond, and actually develop custom analytics, which are helpful for their broader business.
I'm thinking about a dozen or so people that I speak with on a relatively frequent basis who would love to have that conversation with you because they're dealing with large scale data migration, data hygiene issues that for separate reasons that they're really struggling with.
I mean, it's not a small issue, especially as we have our data housed in different systems, different formats. So yeah, I think we deal with it all the time, and that's a friction that we put in a fair bit of time and effort to make sure it's easy for our partners.
Right. I mean, I would go so far as to say it's universal. There's almost no one I speak with who's not facing that challenge on some level. And I think it comes back to the fact that Cardlytics sees so much data at such a high level. You can see things that probably just aren't visible to people, a layer or two down. And maybe there's business in there.
That's true. That's true. Always good ideas are always welcome. Thank you.
Right. So, a couple of things that just kind of occurred to me on the fly here, but you know, you probably have data utility and commerce media utility worked out, so you have a fairly good idea of what to expect, how people are going to deploy this, what kinds of results they can expect on the other end of the system. But what would be, again, because you see a lot of stuff, what's the most surprising use case you've seen from, and I'm just going to say like a non-giant brand that's using your platform?
Yeah. I think, there's, to your point, we see several interesting Easter eggs here and there and nuggets. But, maybe I can just share a couple. So we run part of our value prop to our advertisers is making sure that we have a measurable outcome for our advertisers, right? So we run a test versus control, and we make sure that there's a control audience and there's an exposed test audience so that they can actually make sure they can compare incrementality. And one of the things we recently saw that in a beauty brand example, customers engaged with an offer and they spent $12 more on average. Now, the interesting thing was this was 100% increase, which was pretty interesting, right? And the offer also drove almost close to the 100% lift in sales that significantly exceeded the iROAS goals. So that was a wonderful kind of nugget. So,
are you at liberty to say what the trigger was behind that? And if it's giving away state secrets, don't bother. But
I would say, I think maybe, so I wouldn't go, and to your point, giving away super secret, but I think it goes to, we have mastered the art, Mike, of targeting and relevancy, right? So the right offer to the right consumer at the right time, in the right channel. I think that's the power, right? And we have started to get better at that. That was, we were good, but now we can actually do that more algorithmically at scale on the fly. And that's really interesting. We've got a couple of other ones where we have always on campaigns, and we've seen dramatic increase if we drive and focus them on specific audiences where in some cases, we've seen over 200% iROAS delivery. So, which has been pretty eye-popping, both for us and the advertiser as well.
I talk to a lot of people who are, frankly, passionate about the argument, either one side or the other, on the value of ROAS and as a key metric, because you can misuse it, you can misbuild it, frankly. But a couple of things that are kind of universal in these conversations is, how do you know that what you're spending in these new methods and channels is really driving incrementality rather than just shifting spend around? And and I know you have an answer for that, but I'd love to hear you how when you're asked that question, because I'm sure that you are, how Cardlytics would answer that.
Yeah. So part of this, as I mentioned, we have our TVC methodology. But the reality is we have to make sure if we are certain in our wares, we have to make sure that the advertiser should be able to test it using their models, right? So we have our model, our TVC report that we will generate. But what we've also done is develop a network of industry leading models and connected with them so that, let's say, an advertiser is using a third party like a Nielsen or an analytics partner to run their models or to derive what kind of ROAS they're getting or iROAS they're getting. We now have comfort factor and we've engaged with them so to make sure that our results are certifiable. And
Okay.
that's what makes advertisers say, okay, if you're saying X, let's get a third party, independent third party to verify it. And that holds water. In some cases, Mike, we've seen where we've said something and their models have actually come back with a higher number, right? And that's what we'd like, right? So we'd rather be conservative, but we want to make sure that, it holds water because at the end of the day, the card-linked offer channel, the way we run it, is a performance media channel, right? Because it's not a spray and pray. It's very much a performance media kind of conversation, and that's what gets advertisers excited.
Let's look ahead over beyond the next hill into the horizon a little bit. Um, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you see uh, card linked offers, SKU level targeting, commerce media in general evolving over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I think there is I love the fact that you mentioned the SKU level targeting. I mean, that's one of the new areas that we've started to bring on board. And that becomes very interesting for a large retailer. So, for example, you can imagine a large grocery retailer and a CPG player. So for example, if you want to drive traffic for Coca-Cola to a specific merchant, let's say Dollar General, we can do that, right? And not many parties can do that in a very targeted way, but also scale it up, right? So we're excited about the fact that we launched a pilot on this specific use case in Q2, and we got very successful results. So we're very proud of that, and so now we're in a process of thinking about, okay, how do we take it to the next level? But to your point about, let's draw the line forward. Buying agents will become part of our reality at some point sooner rather than later, and a decent part of our spend is going to start to get influenced by it, right? And at some point, and it could be different varieties of that, right? So it could be Mike saying, "Hey, help me get my next running shoe, and I like these brands, and find the lowest price, and I want to pick it up within, let's say, 10 miles or around Westchester, right?" And the buying agent could go figure out the best offers, best set of opportunities, and surface up to you, and then you can make a decision. Or we can also see in a use case where you basically authorize your buying agent to go and complete the transaction and have the shoe shipped over to you, right? All those scenarios are not too far away. They are coming. It's a matter of when. And that's where card-linked offers has a very interesting role to play, right? So we very much expect to connect with these buying agents so that we can actually have the user or buying agent on behalf of the user make the best decision, and especially in terms of price, especially in terms of the omni-channel play. So that's where we exceed, we excel, and that's something that we're pretty excited about as the future starts to unfold.
It seems to me that your position in the market space, in the broad ecosystem here, is going to be is ideal, frankly, because not only do you see the data and and have access to the transactions, but because effectively you are the rails for so much of commerce media. You have the ability to kind of inject yourselves into agentic commerce in a way that probably a lot of people just don't.
We absolutely believe that. I love the fact that you talked about Rails. So I think, because of the scale, because of our connectivity, both in terms of the banking ecosystem, but also with merchants and advertisers, right? That's what becomes interesting. And so going back to, let's say, the SKU level offers and the category level offers, part of that is made possible by our direct connectivity with a merchant and with an advertiser as well, right? So the data is kind of going back and forth, both from banking and from a merchant ecosystem, and that gives us positions us in a very interesting way, as you said, in agentic buying, and so we're excited about that. And the best part, I would say, is there's a technology part of it, there's a right place, right time part of it, but we're also very, absolutely unbiased, right? So we're very much focused on the end user and delivering the most amount of value for end user. And several of our bank partners are as well, right? So this is not about, I have X kinds of users and we only want to kind of focus on them. Because of our scale on both sides, on the bank side and the advertiser side, we're able to make sure that we're focused on delivering the maximum amount of value for the end user.
You've opened up another 30 or 40 questions and basically ruined your morning for your whatever your schedule is. But a couple of things just kind of occur to me as you're saying that. One is that because the dynamic between consumer and retailer and brand is going to get disintermediated even further by the addition of agentic purchasing agents. Certainly there's opportunity there as you've well articulated, but it also presents some interesting challenges for brands and, what they spend millions, billions, maybe trillions in some cases of dollars trying to build that relationship. How do you manage that? And I'm really curious as to how Cardlytics is advising retailers and brands to think about agentic purchasing as it sits right now, because it's inevitable. It's coming. We all know that, but there's a here and now factor that needs to be kind of processed and dealt with. So how are you advising your clients on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've in a way, Mike, we started to take the first step in that direction because agentic buying, even though it might take a few months or a couple of years, but the first step we started to take by bringing hard-linked offer like CLO and retail media together, right? So we now basically are interacting with some of the leading merchants across different verticals with our newly launched Cardlytics Rewards platform. So this allows us to bring not only a customer loyalty proposition, but also a cashback proposition, which goes back into their currency, into their local wallet, if you will, in their ecosystem. So in some ways, that is the first step. As agentic buying starts to pick up, these retailers or these merchants will be ready from their side to engage with the buying behavior that an agent might engage in or engage with as the agent goes and crawls the net. So that's kind of the first step. The second step, which we expect will also come soon, is for us to contextualize this buying process, both on the agentic side and on the merchant side. And again, because of our scale, we can actually orchestrate that and make that happen as well.
That'd be really interesting. I would love to be a fly on the wall of your analyst group as they're looking through all that data just to see how the patterns emerge. I think it'd be amazing. One other thing, I just want to kind of throw this out there and get your high-level thoughts on it. But I talk to a lot of people who sit in various parts of this big ecosystem. I've spoken, and this is all recent conversations with large multinational agencies who are now in the process of becoming much more tech enablers, not tech platforms in and of themselves, but maybe even, large scale system integrators. And then on the other side, I've spoken with people who are traditional system integrators who are now broadening their offerings to encompass what would have looked like agency work or brand work to provide this kind of holistic approach to customer engagement, to leveraging and building customer performance. So question one is, do you see the same thing I'm seeing, or am I imagining it? Because you probably have an actual view to that. And if you are seeing what I'm seeing, that there is this kind of blending of disciplines and bleeding over of the various kind of borderlines of those offerings. Where do you see that evolving?
Yeah. I think the trend is right, and the trend has been underway for some time. So you're right on. And I think agencies, we work with several leaders in the agency space, and I would probably say comfortably, I think the leaders are very tech forward and tech oriented, either organically or through acquiring assets or partnerships. And so we love the partnerships that we have with some of the agencies. It helps the client, it helps them, it helps us expand our focus. Sorry about the background noise
It's
here.
okay. It's New York. It's what happens.
It's New York. That's exactly right. So, I think, and on the other side, as you said, the integrators, by definition, as they seek to provide greater amount of value to their clients, they're bringing and melding some of the agency-like or old school agency-like characteristics. So that blending absolutely will happen. And I think we also feel comfortable in saying that that'll perhaps accelerate even more. The blurring of the lines will happen even more so. And wherever there are a couple of intersection areas where we are enabling some of these things to happen, especially in case of identity resolution. We can actually help enable some of these cross sections to happen faster. But the other part, I think, perhaps you were also alluding. I'll give a use case. We have a couple of system integrator like organizations, and they've come to us with a mindset of how do we help create new revenue lines for merchants, and that's where commerce media becomes very interesting, right? Because it's not, as we said before, one part is obviously about customer loyalty, but it really does create for certain merchants, it can create a meaningful revenue line, and that's something that we can be really instrumental in, and we're starting to kind of tinker around that.
Customer loyalty is at the core of so much of what we speak about here on this podcast, and really what we publish about. And I think just based on where, depending on how you define customer loyalty, where that little industry has gone and is going, everyone in customer success, customer loyalty are looking for new revenue lines. And there have to be some possibilities there with commerce media. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you couldn't be more spot on. I think that's exactly right, Mike. Typically, for a lot of even leading companies, customer loyalty or customer success end up being cost centers. Our view is these are going to become revenue generation centers very, very soon on the back of commerce media. And we're already seeing that with some of the leading companies that we're in discussions with. As the transition happens, as we start to come back with how do we monetize the first party data in a revenue safe way, in a privacy safe way, this can actually drive a significant revenue line for some of the leading customer frequented merchants. Now, I think it has to be done with the right tech stack. It requires investments and so on. And that's where I'd probably say, selfishly, that we come in and can be that plug where, a leading merchant doesn't have to put that level of investment right away, right? They partner with us and then they figure out, where's the right place for them to invest. But we are a good kind of fast to market, quick revenue generation capability when we partner with them.
Word to my loyalty colleagues, please hear that and digest it. Amit, thank you so much for the time here. I've written down another 15 or so questions for the next time we're able to pull this off. But what you're doing is really interesting. I think it's really powerful, and clearly you're in a great place to pull this off at scale for some very, very big players. The other thing too, we can't even get to this, but is your ability to kind of democratize commerce media for the little guys, smaller players. But we have to leave something for the next conversation.
It was a wonderful conversation. I think the clear through line is there's a lot of optimism around it that we have for sure. But industry actually is very much mirroring that as well. And we're excited about as these new trends unfold and we start to grow our ecosystem in this new direction. So Mike, it was a wonderful conversation and absolutely looking forward to a bunch of new nuggets in the next chat.
we'll have our people get with each other.